Hey guys.
Hi everybody.
Good evening. We're here with another Sunday night video, and it's Cinco de Mayo today. So,
Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Yep. And it's also Game of Thrones again. So we're going to try to make it as quick as we can. But today we're going to be talking about outpatient travel therapy jobs. Whitney and I are both primarily outpatient physical therapists. We prefer outpatient. Almost all of our contracts over the last 4 years have been outpatient. So I think we have a pretty good handle on finding travel outpatient jobs, what to watch out for, all those things. So we're going to try to cover those as much as we can, and hopefully help you guys out that are also interested in outpatient travel jobs.
Yep, so just to give some introductions for you guys that may or may not know us, my name's Whitney Aiken.
I'm Jared Kazazza.
And like Jared said, we are both traveling physical therapists. We've been traveling for about 4 years. And when we got into traveling therapy and when we became physical therapists in general, we were 100% all the way outpatient PTs. We knew going into travel therapy that you might have to be flexible and explore some other settings, and of course we had clinicals and other settings, but ever since starting physical therapy school we always thought outpatient is our main gig. So we were happy to find out that you can in fact find some outpatient travel jobs. So we'll kind of go over that tonight, talk about a lot of things about what you should look for in travel therapy, outpatient jobs, how to find them, is it possible to only work in outpatient, what the pay's like, which states tend to have more outpatient jobs, that kind of thing. But like we said, we're both traveling PTs. We run the site Travel Therapy Mentor, which many of you all may be familiar with. Thank you for those of you that are following us on our Travel Therapy Mentor site. If you haven't already, we would love if you would like and follow our Travel Therapy Mentor Facebook page. We do these weekly videos once a week, usually on Sunday nights. That could be changing soon because we're going to be traveling out of the country to Europe for 4 months. So stay tuned for that. We may be changing the date and the time of our videos, but we hope that you'll continue to tune in. In addition to our Travel Therapy Mentor site, we also have a personal blog. It's called Fifth Wheel Physical Therapist, and many of you may have found us through that. We've been writing on the Fifth Wheel PT blog for years, about 3 years now, I think. And Jared writes a lot about finance, and we write about our adventures on there. So if you guys want to follow along with more of our personal journeys, our travel therapy contracts, as well as our international travels, you can find that information on our Fifth Wheel Physical Therapist Facebook page, as well as our fifthwheelpt.com website. Whereas the Travel Therapy Mentor site, the Facebook page, the Instagram, and the website traveltherapymentor.com is where we do more of our informational stuff, and that's where you'll find a lot of this basic information of how do I get started with travel therapy, what's the pay like, what are the different settings like, what are the benefits like, all of those types of questions that you guys may have for existing travel therapists or those of you that may be getting started with travel therapy. So I see a few of you are joining in with us, a few faces that I know. Hi Matt, hi Lauren, hi Jeff. Jeff says, just dropping in to say hi, I'll catch you on the replay. Gotta finish celebrating my birthday. Happy birthday, Jeff.
Happy birthday on Cinco de Mayo, huh?
Oh, that sounds like a fun day. I didn't even think about that, Cinco de Mayo. So we appreciate your support, Jeff. If anybody else is tuning in with us live, we'd love if you'd say hi below. We'd also love if you would just give us a thumbs up on the video. If you get value out of this content that we provide every week, we would really appreciate a thumbs up or a heart. So Jared is getting the video shared in a couple groups just so more people can join on with us. He's not being antisocial on purpose. So yeah, we'll get started here in just a minute to talk more about outpatient travel jobs. By the way, we are physical therapists, and we do know the most about working in outpatient physical therapy. We know the most about outpatient PT and PTA jobs. We do have a little bit of an insight about OT and speech therapy jobs. If you guys are tuning in, our OTs or CODAs or speech therapists, we have a little bit insight on that, but we definitely have the majority of our wheelhouse, I guess, is in physical therapy. So that's a lot of what we'll be talking about. But yeah, we've going on our 4-year anniversary of traveling. I know a lot of you guys that are in PT school and maybe OT as well, a lot of programs are finishing up, in speech right now in May is big for graduations. I've been seeing a lot of you guys posting that you've passed boards, that you're graduating. This is a super exciting time. Facebook just reminded me on my Facebook memories that it was 4 years ago today that I posted that I passed my boards, and I guess you would have passed boards the same day.
Yep.
In April of 2015 is when we passed our PT boards and became certified and licensed. So it's crazy how fast time flies. So congratulations to those PT students out there that have graduated and passed boards, or to those that are taking boards in July. Good luck. So we'll get started talking a little bit about outpatient travel therapy jobs.
Yeah, so we talked to a lot of students and new grads, and it seems like most of the students and new grads we talked to are interested in outpatient, at least for physical therapists. And a lot of them are worried that they'll have trouble finding those outpatient jobs because they've heard that travel is usually home health and skilled nursing with not much outpatient. And that kind of is the case. So there are a lot of home health and skilled nursing jobs, but like I said earlier, Whitney and I both prefer outpatient. We travel as a couple, so we need 2 jobs in the same location. And we've still been able to do that for almost all of our contracts over 4 years. So it's definitely possible. The real key is to be flexible on location. And that's what we tell everyone that contacts us that's primarily interested in outpatient, is be flexible on the states you go to, like rural areas or urban areas, especially if you're traveling as a couple. If you're single, you can be a little more picky, but as a couple, you need to be pretty open to different locations.
Yeah, so in general, as a travel therapist, whether you're a PT, whether you're an OT, an assistant, or a speech language pathologist, there's a few different areas that you kind of have to have some wiggle room when you're searching for jobs. Now, you could go out there and you could say, I'm a PT, I really want to work in an outpatient sports medicine clinic, making $1,800 a week in Denver, Colorado. And you can dream that all day, but the agencies may or may not be able to make that happen for you. You need to be flexible in at least one of 3 areas, one of which is setting, the other which is location, and the other is pay. So sometimes you might find the setting and the location you want, but maybe the pay is a little lower because maybe it's a super desirable area like Denver, Colorado, or like Hawaii. Or maybe it's that you can find outpatient and they're going to pay you $1,800 a week, but it's going to be in maybe a less desirable state where you don't necessarily want to be.
Or like a really rural area, which is where we normally go.
Yeah, so you kind of have to just be a little bit flexible. If outpatient is your passion and that's the place you feel most comfortable, we recommend getting licensed in more than one state. And being a little bit flexible, so don't try to just pinhole that you want a certain city and a certain state. We recommend branching out. For example, we'll tell you a little bit about how we got started. We started in our home state of Virginia, and we really wanted to take our first job in Virginia because we wanted to be close to home. There were a few different reasons. We had some weddings to go to, that sort of thing. So we really wanted outpatient, but we were also new grads, and we were also being really picky about, we wanted to start as soon as possible. We wanted Virginia. So our first couple jobs, we didn't end up finding outpatient, unfortunately, and we had to settle on the setting.
Yeah, Whitney's first 2, my first 1. If we could go back now, we probably would have done that differently. We both would have waited a little longer for outpatient, but we were both really eager to get started as new grads, start making money. So we kind of jumped into a situation that wasn't ideal for either of us. It turned out okay for me. It turned out kind of bad for her. But yeah, if we could go back now, we would have waited a little longer.
Yeah, and so after that, we decided after we finished our first couple contracts in Virginia, we wanted to branch out and we wanted to go up into the Northeast. So we in general wanted to go to the Northeast, but we didn't really care which state. So after that, we talked to our recruiters and we said, hey, which states tend to have the most PT jobs first? Second, which states tend to have the most outpatient jobs? And they were able to help us figure out that Massachusetts was a good choice. So we ended up getting licensed in Massachusetts. We didn't particularly care. We kind of wanted to go to Maine. We kind of wanted to check out Vermont, but we were like, Massachusetts sounds good. So we went to Massachusetts and we stayed there for 6 months, and we both got to work in the same outpatient clinic, which was awesome. It was a great hospital-based outpatient. We saw a variety of different diagnoses. We had a really good schedule. We loved it. And then on the weekends, we got to explore and go into Boston and go into Rhode Island and Vermont and Maine, all these places we wanted to go. So, just by being a little bit flexible, we were able to find what we wanted. So just talking a little bit about kind of just some recap here, the different types of travel jobs that are most common, like Jared said, are SNF and home health are the top 2.
Yeah, it would be SNF and home health are usually the most common. Probably skilled nursing is the most common, followed by home health, followed by outpatient, and then probably acute care, and then everything else is quite a bit lower down on the
Yeah,
on the spectrum.
and that's primarily for PTs. PT, it's usually home health and SNF are the most common that you're going to see in travel jobs. Next is going to be outpatient and then acute, and then anything else like pediatrics or inpatient rehab are going to be the least common. Now with speech language pathologists, you're going to see more of those inpatient jobs be the most common. For speech therapists, more like the acutes, the SNFs, and then the schools are going to be the most common. I would say outpatient is not as common for speech language pathologists. OT is kind of similar. You're going to see a lot more in SNFs. You're going to see a lot more in acute and home health, and then you are going to see some outpatient for OTs, but they're going to mostly be hand specialists is what they're going to be looking for, is a hand specialist. Not always, but a lot of times is what you're going to see in the market.
Hey Ryan, hey Aiden, and hey Brandon. Thanks for joining. We're getting some questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll answer them. We'll wait until the end and answer all the questions.
Yeah, we'll answer some questions closer to the end. We kind of have a few things we want to just go through as far as outpatient jobs go. So that's kind of the spread of the market of what you're going to see typically with different disciplines. So we talked about being flexible in your location and getting licensed in a few states. So when you're first getting into travel therapy, maybe you're only going to be licensed in your home state, and that's okay. And if you want to do like we did and start in your home state to get your feet wet, then you may have to be flexible on that setting. But then maybe after that, branch out and get 1 to 2 other licenses so you'll have options. Some different states that we have noticed that are good for outpatient. We mentioned on the East Coast, Massachusetts tend to be pretty good. There tends to be a lot of PT jobs in Massachusetts. On the West Coast, California is just amazing.
Yeah. If you want consistent outpatient work, even as a couple, you're pretty good with a California license. You'd be in pretty good shape. On the East Coast, Virginia, North Carolina, Massachusetts are probably the top 3, and that's the ones that we got licensed in for that reason.
Mm-hmm. And we've worked a ton of jobs in Virginia and North Carolina. Some of that for personal reasons because we're from Virginia, but we've found good outpatient opportunities. Is there anybody in here that's interested in East Coast? Just comment and let us know. If you're interested in somewhere around Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, or like the Washington, D.C. area, we have a really good connection with a company that's based out of the Washington, D.C. area, and they've been able to get us some really good outpatient contracts. They actually specialize in working with outpatient clinics around the Maryland, they call it the DMV area, the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. They also have stuff in the other states like North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, that kind of stuff. So if you guys are interested in any of those states and want to do outpatient, especially for PTs, but also OTs, shoot us a message or comment below and we can get you their information as well.
Yep.
Some other ones out west that tend to be pretty good. Arizona tends to be pretty good, but as we found out earlier this year, you want to be careful with your timing with somewhere like Arizona. They have heavy seasonal needs. So we thought, okay, snowbirds, they're going to come down and maybe we'll have a good chance of getting a job in Arizona in January. Well, apparently we missed the buggy because apparently a lot of people go ahead and get licensed and get jobs set up in the fall or the end of the winter, like October, November, December in Arizona. And so by the time January rolled around, there were no jobs for us in Arizona.
Yeah, a lot of people want to go there during that time because you get away from the cold and everything. So there's a high supply of PTs during that time, and it can be hard to find jobs there. But pretty much any other time of the year, after probably February through December, there seems to be a lot of outpatient jobs in Arizona. Washington State is also another good state.
Mm-hmm. Oregon is pretty decent too. Ones that aren't so good in general are for travel jobs. Utah and Colorado tend to be tougher. We've almost never seen jobs in Utah. I guess it just must be the perm therapists there are holding on to all the jobs because they don't need any travelers. So yeah, there's just a few good states that you want to maybe talk to your recruiters. If you guys need recommendations for recruiters, by the way, we can get you in touch with some good ones. If you just want to comment recruiter below, we'll let you know. But the best thing to know is they know the market the best, the recruiters do. So if you talk to them and say, hey, I really am passionate about outpatient. I want to be in the Midwest or I want to be in the West Coast. Where do you recommend I get licensed? And they can help you with that process so that you're not, going and getting licensed in Utah and thinking, oh, I'm going to find outpatient jobs in Utah, because you're probably not.
Yeah, we talked to quite a few PTs that they graduate, they don't know anything about the travel market, they get licensed in a few states that they want to go to, and then they find out that there's no jobs in those states, so it was a waste. So at least do your research before you start getting licensed in different states.
Yeah. So those are just a few things about being flexible and some different locations that we see. One thing I wanted to touch on, and I actually see that Lauren just asked this question, and it was written down for me to answer anyway, is are most of these outpatient jobs ortho? She says, have you seen any other outpatient jobs such as neuro? So what I typically see is on the websites or when they advertise these jobs, they're typically gonna just list them as outpatient. Sometimes they have more details and sometimes they don't, and you might find out a little bit closer to the interview. I would say the majority of them are general ortho outpatients, kind of see a variety of everything. There are going to be a few that are peds, a few that are neuro, and a few that are sports medicine, but the majority of them are just general outpatient orthopedic type practices. The ones that we're at right now, we see a little bit of everything from general orthopedic complaints to sports medicine patients, geriatrics, we see vestibular, we see a little bit of everything neuro. I see a little bit of like later strokes type of thing. So just a variety, but I haven't seen as many like specializing in neuro.
Yeah, not as many, just because I think those are a lot more rare than the general orthopedic ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so yeah, right now I've got patients from 7 to like 96, like, so a huge spectrum there, but it's mostly orthopedic.
Yeah.
You can find neuro, but it's just more rare.
Yeah, it's just fewer and far between. So if you really want something specialized like neuro, outpatient, or peds outpatient, you're going to have to be even more flexible in your searches and your states that you're looking for. And you might be more inclined to find something that's going to be kind of like a mix. Like we've been offered a couple jobs where it was more of a mix of age groups. Like they were saying, we need you to see adults and pediatrics as young as infants, and we were like, we aren't comfortable with that because we don't have any peds experience. So even though it was like a mix, if I got a baby eval for torticollis, I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So you just sometimes you find out this information more in the interview.
Yeah, and usually if there's something you're not comfortable with, you don't have to see that. So you find out in the interview. So say like a TMJ eval or something like that. For the most part, if you're at a clinic, they will be willing to have someone else see that if you're not comfortable with that diagnosis or you've never treated that or
if there's another PT there. Now if it's a really rural clinic and you're it, then you're gonna have to see it.
Yeah.
So I had a TMJ eval at this clinic and so did Jared, and we were like, we've never treated TMJ before, and then everybody was so like, well, hey, here's a book that you can study up on it, here's a MedBridge course you can study up on it, and oh, do you want to practice MOBs on me at lunch? They were really uplifting and encouraging. They're like, you can do it. And TMJ is like, well, we learned it in school, I just now haven't really treated it. But torticollis or infants with developmental disorders is kind of outside of my scope for sure.
Yep.
Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about what kind of pay you can look for in these outpatient jobs.
Yep. So we talked about job availability with home health and SNF being the highest, outpatient kind of in the middle. For pay, where most people think that outpatient jobs probably pay lower because that's kind of how it is in the permanent world, that's not true in terms of travel. So normally home health pays the best, outpatient is probably second, right around tied with acute care. They both pay pretty well, with skilled nursing being lower than that. So outpatient jobs tend to pay pretty well, especially on the West Coast.
I'd say outpatient is pretty average across the board. So speaking from a physical therapist standpoint, we recommend that anybody doesn't take a job starting out lower than about $1,500. So $1,500 is going to be your starting point. Every now and then you'll see SNF jobs that are a little bit below $1,500, like in the 14s or the low 15s. You're going to want your outpatient jobs. You're going to be seeing more like $1,550, $1,580.
And this is weekly after tax pay.
Weekly after tax pay up in the 1600s. And then in higher cost of living areas, you're going to see your outpatient jobs, like the ones that we usually work and have seen in like the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. They're usually more in the 1700s, the 1800s, and close to like in Washington, D.C., more like the 1900s.
Yeah.
Same thing on the West Coast. If you're near a big city on the West Coast, you're going to be seeing more like the 1800, 1900 range for these outpatient jobs.
And sometimes rural jobs will pay really well too, just because they're more desperate. So they don't have as many people applying for these jobs. So they have to increase their rate to get someone to get in there. And so, for example, Whitney and I both worked pretty rural contracts in North Carolina for a while, and they needed a lot of PTs. They had a lot leave at the same time. So they were pretty desperate, and they were paying us the most we've ever made for any travel job. It was, I think it was like $18.60 a week after taxes, which was a lot of money for a really cheap area to live. So
and the schedule is super easy. We're going to talk a little bit about productivity expectations and like what you'll see across, like, is it hospital based, is it private practice? They were super easy, like one-on-one treatments, one-on-one evals, and they were super high paying. But yeah, it was kind of a rural area, so you kind of have this trade-off of, we really enjoyed it because there was a lot of hiking in the area. It was beautiful. But if you're really somebody that wants to be in these big cities, it may or may not, it just depends. Sometimes big cities pay more because the cost of living is more, but sometimes rural areas pay more because they are less desirable.
Yep.
Talking a little bit more about pay.
So that the range that you're going to be looking for the most part, for outpatient jobs is probably going to be somewhere in the $15.50 per week after taxes to about $18.50. Somewhere in that range is where almost all travel jobs are going to be for outpatient, except sometimes you'll see higher than that in California. So if you go through a really small company and you go to a rural area or a really high cost of living area in California, you might find some jobs paying like close to $2,000 a week after taxes. But for the most part, you're going to see most jobs between $15.50 and $18.50.
Yeah. Also, talking about like the difference in a hospital-based versus a private practice, it might be that sometimes a private practice can't pay as much because they are in business for themselves and they don't have this huge budget. Like a hospital might have a bigger budget and really be in desperate need of a PT, whereas if it's a private practice job where they've already got 5 PTs and they're adding a 6th one because their caseload's a little high, they may or may not be willing to pay as high.
Well, the other thing to remember too is that reimbursement rates are different based on hospital-based versus physician-owned versus private practice. So hospital-based clinics get reimbursed higher than a private practice does, which means that they can have a traveler there and pay them more money to see the same amount of patients as a private practice can't do that. So a private practice might only be able to offer the travel company $60 to $65 an hour for them to still make a profit off of you being there. Whereas a hospital might be able to pay $70 or $75 an hour for the same number of units built because they're getting reimbursed higher.
Yeah.
So that's important to remember.
Yeah, and if you guys don't really understand what Jared's talking about when he says bill rate, you can feel free to ask us a question in the comments. We can link to some articles that talk about bill rates and how that affects your pay, because we've seen some conversations out there in different online forums, Facebook groups, talking about, where does this pay come from and why can't they pay me more, and shouldn't the travel company be paying for this and shouldn't the travel company be paying for that? But really it all boils down to how much is the facility paying the travel company. That's where all the money comes from. So if they're only paying the travel company X, then they may or may not be able to pay you X, Y, and Z, because they may or may not just have that money in the bill rate.
And you have to remember that the facility can only pay a certain amount, because if they go over that, then they're losing money, right? So they can't pay $90 an hour if they're only getting reimbursed from the insurance company an average of $80 per hour for what that PT is billing, right? It just doesn't make sense for them. So the bill rate, reimbursement rates all play into how much we can possibly make.
Yeah, and so we mentioned these numbers, these pay numbers, $15.50 to $18.50 would be kind of what you'd see for a PT and outpatient. In general, a speech therapist, for those rare speech therapist outpatient jobs, probably should be around that same range. Speech and PT tend to be on the same, about the same pay rate. OT sometimes a little bit lower, so you might be seeing OT jobs $14.50 up to $17.50 or so. PTA and CODA, I don't see many CODA outpatient jobs, to be honest. You're going to see more SNFs and home health for CODAs. Maybe some outpatient for PTA. And I think the outpatient PTA maybe average $12.50, $13.50 or so.
Probably in like the $11.50 to $13.50 range, something like that.
Yep. So what if you don't have experience in outpatient, but you're looking to get more experience in outpatient? There are some therapists that are very good at SNF and home health, but they're looking to branch out into other settings, especially with a lot of these Medicare changes coming. They don't know, what's the future of SNFs going to be for therapists. So maybe you want to get some outpatient experience.
So our recommendation for that would be the same as we recommend for new grads. So if you don't have experience in outpatient and you want to work in outpatient, or if you're a new grad that wants to work in outpatient, you're kind of in the same position, right? You probably have some experience there, or you have some knowledge there, of course, but you're nervous about it. You probably want to go to one of these outpatient clinics that is in one of these rural hospital-based clinics that we were talking about. The reason for that, there's a few reasons. One, they're usually more laid back. So the patients in these areas, usually the pace of life is slower. You see a lot of older folks, and so you have more time to spend with the person and figure things out. Like we were talking about with hospital-based, they get reimbursed higher, so your caseload is usually pretty light in hospital-based clinics compared to a private practice. So in a private practice where they might need you to see 12 to 16 in a day, in an 8-hour day, that's pretty common in private practice, outpatient. Most hospital-based, it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 12. So you have more time with each person, which means that you have more time to think about things. You might have more, if you have a cancellation, you have time to research things about a patient. So say you're not familiar with a diagnosis or you're not comfortable with it, you can talk to your coworkers because they're not as busy. Whereas if you jump right into one of these private practice that's really crowded and you have double books and things like that, it can get really hectic, and that's not a good experience.
It's like a sink or swim experience.
Yeah, it's not a good experience for people that don't have any experience juggling that difficult caseload.
Yeah, and sometimes these outpatient jobs won't accept clinicians that don't have outpatient experience. But I was talking to somebody the other day. It's like, well, how do you get experience if you can't get experience? Yeah. So the best place I would say for anybody, a new grad looking to get more experience in outpatient, or a clinician that's looking to switch settings, would be go for some of these rural hospital outpatient jobs, because a lot of times you'll actually float between different units, and that's a really good experience for everything. Like, we've worked at a couple really small rural hospitals where we worked outpatient, inpatient acute, and inpatient long-term rehab all within the same building, and we got a really good variety of experience, and the productivity expectations were way more laid back. You didn't necessarily have to have like this sports med outpatient ortho experience that they expect at a private practice. So that's a really good place to go into, and also they're really appreciative to have your help. We really love working at outpatient hospital-based jobs.
Yeah, we feel really valued there. Another thing about hospital-based is a lot of times you can either take an acute care job at a rural hospital if you're more comfortable in acute care, and then almost always they'll have people float back and forth. So from outpatient to acute or from acute to outpatient, because there's not a big enough need in either area to have too many full-time therapists. So a lot of times the traveler will be kind of floating back and forth. So that's a good way to get some experience in outpatient without being there full-time.
Jared even got experience in outpatient wound care, which isn't very common to see these days. Most facilities, I would say the nurses do wound care, not the PTs, but some rural places, the PTs do still do wound care. So Jared got to float between outpatient, acute, wound care, and
I was doing skilled nursing too.
It was a really cool first job for him.
One assignment I had, I basically was the only PT in the skilled nursing, the only PT in the acute care, and one of like 2 or 3 PTs in outpatient. So it was a really small hospital. So I got experience in all different settings, which was nice as a new grad.
Yeah. So some things to look for in a contract. Now, these are things that you're going to find out more during your interview with the facility, because like I said, when you first see a job advertised and you agree to submit your application or submit for an interview with your recruiter, they're not going to know too much about the job off the bat. Sometimes they might know a little bit, but these are questions you want to find out during your interview to find out if it's going to be a good situation or not. Because unfortunately, some outpatients get a bad rap, and people get put in really bad situations where they're like, they've got me seeing 10 evals a day, and I'm taking home 5 hours of paperwork, and I'm double booked, and I'm overlapped, and I'm just being run into the ground. And so there's a lot of ways that you can find out during an interview to avoid that situation and not get put in a bad spot.
Yep. Something you have to remember about that too is that sometimes they don't even realize what they're doing to you as a traveler. They have the permanent clinicians there that are usually salaried. So a lot of these places we're going to, their permanent clinicians are salaried. The permanent clinicians might be used to working 45 or 46 hours a week. They're getting paid salary. They don't get paid overtime, right? They bring a traveler in that's getting paid hourly and expect the traveler to do the same amount of work in 40 hours. And sometimes that can be unrealistic depending on the situation. It is kind of expected for travelers to pick things up pretty quickly, but still, like if the permanent staff is taking 45 or 46 hours to do this caseload, it's hard to expect the traveler to do it in 40. And so sometimes the managers don't realize what they're putting on you, right? And what we found is that you sometimes have to have difficult conversations of like, hey, I'm hourly. If I'm here doing documentation, I'm still on the clock, which means that I'm going to be getting overtime. Is that okay with you? And sometimes it is okay. I've gotten a lot of overtime while we've been traveling, and sometimes it's not okay. And in that case, they'll be like, okay, well, let me adjust the caseload so that that you can manage it.
Yeah, and you just honestly have to stand up for yourself, and it's not You don't have to be confrontational. You just be matter of fact about it, I guess I would say. You know, I'm an hourly employee. I work based on hours. I write down my in time. I write down my out time. Now, we're not so strict to the point that if I maybe was being a little slow one day or was talking to my coworkers and I end up staying 15 minutes late to, like, you know, I'm not necessarily going to write down that I stayed 15 minutes late. But if I'm finding that the caseload that they're giving me is unmanageable and I'm spending an hour at lunch off the clock or an hour after or an hour before work, then I'm either going to put down that on my timesheet or I'm going to have a conversation with maybe my manager or maybe my recruiter to say the caseload isn't such that I can complete it in 40 hours. So either they're going to pay me overtime for this or I'm just going to have to adjust my caseload.
Yeah, there was a question almost exactly like this in the Doctor of Physical Therapy group just earlier this week. And it was a new grad travel therapist asking about a outpatient assignment that she was doing where they would have one day of all evals. So she would have 4 days of treatments and then a whole day of evals, which means that on one day she had 8 evals. It's not realistic to expect someone, especially a new grad, and especially new to a documentation system, to do 8 evals and have it all typed in an 8-hour day, right? So those are the kind of conversations that you have to be like, hey, there's no way I can do this. Do you want to pay me overtime, or do you want to reduce the caseload a little bit so that I can get
carve out
done?
some time to do my documentation? You know, if I have to have these 8 eval days, could it be more like a 7 eval day with an hour of documentation, or the next morning maybe I have a half an hour carved out that I can catch up on this, or that sort of thing? Or sometimes you can get evaluations done in less than an hour and allow time for documentation, but if they require that you bill 4 units for an eval, then that's not the case. So sometimes, like, if it's a company that's okay with you only billing 2 evals on the first day, or 2 units on the first day, maybe you can try to get that patient out of there in 30 to 45 minutes and still have extra time to document. But these are just things you need to discuss in a professional way.
Yeah.
So just a few things that you might want to talk about or ask during your interview when you're going into an outpatient job. And again, you always want to maintain confidence in yourself and your abilities, but don't sound overconfident. Don't say that you can do things. Don't commit to things that you can't really realistically do, especially as a new grad. So you want to find out in general how many patients per day you're expected to see. If you are not familiar with outpatient, and I'm mostly, again, talking about PTs, but this will kind of, you know, it overlaps a little bit into other disciplines. But if you know you're a new grad and you know that you're not that confident yet in your abilities, and they say that they're seeing 20 patients a day in an 8-hour day, that's way too many. Yeah. I would say a good number is between 10 to 14 at the most. We have worked some places where it was 1 hour, one-on-one, 8 patients a day. It was magical.
Yeah, and sometimes cancellation. So there was days where you might see 6 or 7.
Yeah, I would say that's more rare, and those are usually your hospital-based outpatients like we talked about. I'd say more normal for physician-owned practices or private practices or like chain private practice type places is going to be between 12 and 14 a day. You want to find out if you're expected to do double books. And if you're expected to overlap patients. So if you don't have a lot of outpatient experience, you might not know what I mean, but a lot of clinics will schedule patients on the half hour, but the expectation is you generally keep them there 45 minutes to an hour or more. So if they're scheduled, if you have a patient at 8, another one at 8:30, another one at 9, but your 8 is still there from 8 to 9. So from 8:30 to 9, you have 2 patients there at the same time, and then again at 9 to 9:30, 2 patients there. Now you can imagine if you have to start double booking and overlapping, you could have up to 3 to 4 patients there at the same time. So these are just things you want to find out during the interview. What's the caseload going to be like to know whether it's something that you can manage realistically or not.
Yep.
Staffing, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so another thing to ask about is if they have techs there, because if you have overlapping patients, it's not a big deal if you have a tech there to help you out, like cleaning tables and changing pillowcases and getting ice packs or whatever. Having a tech there is really helpful. So you don't realize how much it helps until you don't have one. So at my current clinic, we have overlapping patients, we have double books sometimes and no techs, and I get stressed sometimes. So it just depends. Some people love that kind of situation, some people don't. I'm one that I would much rather be more thorough with each patient than quickly going from person to person. So yeah, ask about techs, ask about how many PTAs, because another issue, this was on my first contract, if you're the only therapist there and you have several assistants, so say like 3 or 4 PTAs sometimes, you're almost only going to be doing evals, progress notes, and discharges. The PTAs are going to be doing all the treatments, which it makes it difficult because you don't get to follow through with someone's plan of care, one, and two, you have a lot of extra documentation to do. So think about those things. So say, okay, I'm comfortable with 12 patients a day. You interview, they say, yeah, we have 12 patients scheduled today. You're like, okay, that'll be fine. But then you find out that there's 3 PTAs there. So you're gonna be doing extra documentation almost every single patient you see. That's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and we have heard of clinics where they primarily use their PTs to do a lot of the evals and then pass off almost all the treatments to the PTAs. So that's something important to know. Like, am I just going to be an eval machine? You know, so 8 patients to 12 patients a day, but if they're all evals and they're all progress reports, that's not realistic. And then going back to talking about the realistic expectations with the productivity. So even if it's 8 to 12 patients a day, but if they're all overlapping and they're all double booking and there's no techs, maybe you can manage that, maybe you can juggle it, but are you also going to juggle it and juggle documentation? Because something
and provide quality care.
Yeah, and provide quality care and billing,
concern.
And if it's all Medicare, you know, is this legal? There's just so many questions. So a lot of times these managers, these hiring managers that you're doing an interview with will try to convince you, oh, the PT is here, they handle it fine. The last traveler was here, they handle it fine, they do great. But the thing is, like, you need to know it's your license, how good a care are you providing? And second thing, part of your job is documentation. What we really hate is that a lot of the environment in outpatient is that you're supposed to see 40 hours of patient care and the documentation is supposed to be on your own time. That's not right.
Yeah.
It's really messed up in the healthcare field in general, but I see it a
it's
lot.
not just outpatient, it's skilled nursing.
Yeah, but
sometimes.
I definitely see it in outpatient PT where it's like, oh, you're scheduled an 8-hour day of full patient care, but they're not allowing any time for you to do your documentation. And I don't necessarily mean like they have to set aside time for documentation. That's probably not going to happen. We've seen it at a couple clinics, few and far between. But at least having text to fill in those 5 or 10 minute gaps here and there. Oh, can you take them through these last few exercises? Well, I'm just going to be right here watching you, but I'm going to finish up this note. Or that sort of thing. You need to understand, is it a manageable caseload to be able to not only get the patient seen, provide quality care, and finish your documentation, because you are an hourly employee and you should be out of there in 40 hours.
Yep.
So just a little bit to think about when you're in your interview. And some of this, like if we start hearing things like during an interview and it just starts to go south and we've kind of already made up our mind that this isn't going to be a good job for us, we just kind of like internalize it and say, oh, okay, like I'm going to get through this interview and then I'm going to turn this job down.
We've turned down a lot of outpatient jobs that are generally private practices that are really busy, and they'll say like, well, we normally have 16 scheduled, but sometimes it might be more than that. When they start saying stuff like that, we're like,
and sometimes,
okay.
oh yeah, so 30-minute evals, you can do it, and the tech's there to help you, and it's just like, well, these things start adding up and we start being like, yeah, we're not going to take this job.
Yeah.
So those are some things to look out for. You also want to know about the documentation system, if you're familiar with it. A really great documentation system we love to hear when it's WebPT. WebPT is super easy. You can get your notes done really quick. You can usually, I remember one time I had 5 evals back to back when I had WebPT, and I got all 5 of them in there and done, and the patient was done and the note was done within the hour. Boom, 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 because WebPT was so easy. But if there's something else that is going to take a lot longer, then you might be like, okay, is it going to be realistic that I can get my documentation done?
Yeah, that can really make or break things. I've had situations where, I can get a whole eval typed within 10 minutes after the person leaves, but I've also had other documentation systems where it'll take me 30 minutes. It's not that I'm changing anything, it's that the documentation system just takes a lot longer. So that's an important thing to find out.
Yep. And so sort of along those same lines, I've definitely had managers on the phone say, but it's okay, you can take your laptop home at night to do your notes, that's what we tend to do. And if you hear that, that's like red flag. It's like, no, I'm not taking my laptop home to do my notes.
Yep.
You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
If you're an hourly employee, you should get paid for the hours that you work. And if you take your notes home, not a good idea.
Yep. We have never done any notes at home. So do your notes in the clinic, bill for whatever time you're there, and don't let them pressure you into taking notes home for sure.
Right. So definitely stand up for yourself as a clinician and your license. So then there's a bunch of other questions that you want to ask during any interview. What's the dress code going to be? Do I work weekends? What's my schedule going to be? Is it 5-10 or 4-10s? Is it 5-8s? What are my hours? All that kind of stuff. But those are kind of general questions that you'd ask during any interview. You might want to know what your patient population is to make sure, like we talked about earlier, is it primarily outpatient ortho? Is it sports med? Is it peds? Is it neuro? Kind of know whether you're going to be able to manage that caseload, those diagnoses. Some other things that I had written down were just like, what other support staff is there? I have worked at some clinics where they didn't really have a front desk person, and so you kind of did your own scheduling.
Yeah.
So you have to account for that. It's like, okay, I do the eval, and I have to print off their home exercise program, and I have to get them scheduled in the computer. And you know, you got these moms, the soccer moms that pull out their calendar. Well, can you do Tuesday but then Wednesday it needs to be and then Friday, but no, that won't work. But next week he has a dentist appointment. So you could be sitting there for 15 minutes, like scheduling somebody, and you need to account for that in your productivity.
Yeah, actually, that seems crazy probably to some of you guys, but several clinics we've worked at, we had to do our own scheduling, so it can take a while.
Yeah, we worked at like even the rural, we had a rural contract that was super easy, outpatient, one-on-one, 8 patients a day, but there were no techs, and sometimes there wasn't a front office person. So we had to clean our own tables, get our own equipment, schedule our own patients. So sometimes I even got a little behind on notes there, even though it was like, wow, this is so easy, one-on-one, but just a few things to consider.
Yep.
So I want to go through, we want to answer some questions that you guys have. I know a lot of people have written questions in the comments. If you guys are watching right now, or if anybody's watching on the replay, please comment below and let us know if you have questions. Also, if you guys would just give us a thumbs up or a little heart below on the video, we would really appreciate it. If you have gotten value out of what we've talked about this evening, we would really appreciate your support.
The more you interact with the video, the more people see it, which is awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a few friends on. Hi, guys.
Okay, we got a few questions about CEUs. So, you want to talk about CEUs?
Yeah, so not necessarily just related to this topic about CEUs. There's a lot of different ways that you can get CEUs as a travel therapist. One way that we've really enjoyed getting CEUs and has been really successful for us is using a website called MedBridge.
It can be tough getting CEUs as a traveler because, especially if you're going to rural places like we were just talking about, there's not a lot of courses that are going to be coming to a rural area. You might have to drive several hours to get somewhere. So we've gotten a lot of value from online CEUs while we've been traveling. Yeah,
MedBridge is a really nice subscription website where you can, they also help you keep track of your different CEU requirements for your different licenses. So if you are licensed in different states, it really helps with that because you can view the videos and they'll tell you if this course qualifies for your license in Virginia and North Carolina and Arizona and how many CEUs it counts for and which category and that sort of thing. You can use, we have a code, a discount code for MedBridge. It's Fifth Wheel PT, FIFTHWHEEL PT.
All one word.
All one word. We can write that in the comments too. So if you use that code, it's only $200 for the whole year.
Unlimited
CEUs, and that's for PTs and OTs. For speech therapists, it's only $95 for the whole year. And so you can get all your CEUs for the year, including in-person live ones. They're not in-person, but they're live, and they count.
Webinars count as live.
They count as live ones. Other than that, sometimes you can get CEUs through the facility if, say, they have a course that's going on while you're there. Other than that, you might just have to carve out some time either on the weekends or between contracts to go attend actual CEU courses, but that's hard to do sometimes planning-wise, so we really like the online platform, the MedBridge subscription.
Yeah, last weekend actually I did a whole course on neck, thoracic spine, and lumbar spine evaluation and treatment, and it was 33 credit hours, so that was awesome.
That's literally all that you need for the state of North Carolina. I think it's 30 for the whole year, and he did it all in just a weekend online on the couch.
So it's really nice to be able to do that.
And it was a good review of a lot of stuff orthopedic-wise. I know the place that I'm at right now, the permanent employees actually use MedBridge to stay sharp on different outpatient topics. I know for PTs, there are a ton of high-quality courses on there with very well-known names in the PT world, so it's not just BS.
Yeah, and that whole course that I took was by Chad Cook, who's a really smart guy, so I definitely, it was a really good refresher for me. Glory asks, in general, how long is the process of getting licensed in additional states? It's a tough question, and there's a huge variability. So it can be as short as 1 week for some states. It can be really, really fast, 1 to 2 weeks. And then some states can be 3 to 4 months. So it just depends on the state. And another big factor is how many other licenses you have, because every license that you have, when you apply for a new one, you have to send verification from the licensing board from the current states to this new state to say that your license is in good standing. and that can take a while. So you have to send a request to this state. They have to send a copy to this state. So it can take a little while.
Yeah.
So if you only have one license, it'll be quicker. But for us, we've had five licenses now in the past. So every new state we get, we have to get all 5 of those states to send verification to this new state. So there's a lot of variability. It depends on the state. But if you have any questions about specific states, we can talk a little bit about that. We're familiar with some of them.
Yeah, I also have a list of just kind of a spreadsheet that has all the different, a general guideline. Glory, if you want me to send you that, if anybody else wants me to send you that resource, you can comment, just comment below and tell me you want that resource. It has a whole list of all the PT licenses.
Yeah, just comment like licenses or something.
Yeah, and it just tells you generally like this state is 2 to 3 weeks, this state is a month to 2 months, you know, and it gives you a link to their website.
Yeah, so Josie said she's curious about CU's 5 licenses. Yeah, it can be tough maintaining all that, but yeah, we really like MedBridge because they keep track of the requirements for the states and then which courses you took apply to which states and all that. Because otherwise it can be tough to keep track
so what you do is like we're licensed in like 3 states, so we'll just enter in there my Virginia license number, my North Carolina license number, my Arizona license number, and each course that you take, it gives you a course certificate. Oh, that's the ding that means dinner's ready. A course certificate, and it'll say in the fine print like good for 5 CEUs for the state of Virginia, good for blah 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 for the state of whatever, and so it's really nice, MedBridge, to keep track of that stuff. Okay, Kira wants to know, I'm open to working in so many states. How many licenses do you recommend starting off with?
I would talk to a recruiter. So assuming that you're going to be graduating, you know, when you get close to graduation, so say maybe 4 or 5 months before, give them a list of what states you might be interested in, and then have them tell you what states they usually see a lot of jobs in, for especially for whatever setting you want. And then I would start with probably just 2. I would not
1 to 2.
I would not tell someone to get licensed in a bunch of states because you have all this upfront cost. You don't know if you're gonna even work in those states. By the time you even do work in those states, you almost always have to renew it, and it's a hassle that it's not worth it. I would do 1 or 2 states that have a lot of jobs and start there, and then branch out from there.
Yeah, and so then when you're already on contract, if you decide you want to work in the next state, you can start working on that license while you're already working in this state. And a lot of times the travel companies, when you're already on contract with them and become kind of an established traveler, will actually help you financially and with the process of getting licensed in the next state.
Yeah.
So Josie says, I'm a PTA and I would love to be introduced to that company that's near Virginia and DC. So Josie, I'll send you that information after the video. If anybody else is listening and wants to know which company we've had good success with working in outpatient near Virginia, Washington, DC, or Maryland, or general on the East Coast.
Too.
Please just comment below about that company and we'll send you their information.
They've got a lot of jobs that other people don't have, which has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, and you'll see on our page, sometimes we post their jobs because they're just so different. We'll just promote some of their jobs because I'm like, wow, you mean you can do a sports med clinic in DC making $1,900 like a week? I wish we weren't going to Europe. I'd take that job.
Yeah, really.
I don't wish we weren't going to Europe though. I'm excited for going to Europe.
Lauren asked about neuro jobs. We covered that. Ryan asked about CUs as well. Jonathan said he can only handle outpatient PT. Yeah, I mean, it's tough in some settings with difficult transfers, max assist. So it is really nice on your body to do outpatient.
Lauren says she'll take all the babies. I know Lauren's looking for a peds contract, so you fight the good fight, Lauren, and work with all the babies, and we'll keep working with the old people. I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting how to pronounce your name. Kiara, I think. I'm shocked that SNF pays lower because in the perm world it's the opposite. You're so right.
We were surprised too.
I don't know why exactly, but yeah, in the travel world, SNF pays lower. In the perm world, it pays higher. I don't know why. Yeah, it is, and she says it is difficult for new grads because they tend to have higher productivity and ethical issues. We agree. We try to avoid SNFs, but a lot of people like them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's also saying she has reservations about taking a job in an area that's rural because they may or may not be very diverse racially, which could make it harder for you. Yes, we have heard other people of color that have these same sentiments that you're talking about, and you know, this is something that we haven't necessarily experienced, but we have heard other persons of color express these same concerns.
Yeah, so one thing I would say in that situation is you might be like, so what we always do when we have potential jobs, so say a company has 2 jobs that are pretty close to each other, we start like Googling the towns that they're in, right, and surrounding areas. And you can find things like demographic information, socioeconomic information, unemployment rates,
Crime rates.
all these things. So you might get an offer in a rural area that might be pretty diverse, and there are some for sure.
Right.
Whereas there are some that are just completely homogenous, pretty much, right?
So a good thing to do, again, would be Googling the area and looking up some stats about it. You can also use Facebook groups, such as, some of our groups, and there's some other travel therapy groups out there. Use your community. So you want to ask, hey, has anybody ever been to this area before? Please send me a message. I'd love to ask you about it. And you can get a feel. There's a really good community online of other travel therapists that would be willing to help you out. And maybe you speak with another therapist who says, no, like absolutely don't go to that area. But maybe they say it was great for them. So, something to consider, it can definitely be a concern.
Josie said she has concerns about finding housing in rural areas. Yeah, it can be harder. In some situations, it can be easier. It just depends on the area, because we've seen some rural areas that had tons of housing, and we've seen some that had very, very little. But yeah, you're right.
We usually scope out the housing situation before we accept the job. Now, you may or may not have housing nailed down for sure, but you might know at least if there's some options. Again, reach out to your community of fellow travel therapists. There's a lot of travel nursing housing groups as well, nursing and therapy groups, where you can reach out and find some information and find out if you're going to have a good opportunity to find housing or if it's something you should avoid.
Jonathan asked, how do you turn someone down? So talking about the manager, like if you are talking and the interview doesn't seem like it's going well, how do you turn them down? Normally what we do is we, of course, stay respectful. We finish out the interview. We know that we don't want to go there usually within 5 or 10 minutes, but the interview might be 30 minutes. So we're still nice and ask questions and all that. But yeah, we say, okay, we'll talk to our recruiter about it, and it was good talking to you and all that stuff.
You normally don't have to commit on the interview.
You definitely don't have to commit. And then from there, we'll just tell the recruiter, like, no, we're not interested in that. And usually that's the end of it. You never hear from that person again. They move on to the next candidate. It's not a big deal.
It's nice because you kind of have that buffer. So honestly, you really just say something along, even if we want to accept it, we normally leave it hanging. We say, this sounds wonderful, or, okay, we'll let you know. We're going to touch base with our recruiter to hammer out the details, and we'll get back to you. And that's all you have to say. Or something along, you can even say something along the lines of, we're still considering some other options, and so we'll have to let you know.
Yep. So Sarah said, you may have answered this already. Do you need a separate license in every state that you travel to? Yeah, you do. If you're a physical therapist, there are some states that are involved in the physical therapy compact now, that if you're licensed in one of those compact states, then there's an easier process to go to the other states involved in the compact. But in general, yeah, you have to get licensed in every state. Which...
And we wrote an article on this, so I can link to that for you, Sarah, so you can read more on it. Okay, so a lot of people want to see that licensing spreadsheet. I will share that with you guys after this.
Sarah asked about pediatric opportunities. So that is an area that we don't really look for much, so we're not that familiar with which states might have more. But I would say that pretty much any job that you're interested in, your best bet is probably going to be California. Just because, like I looked the other day, they have almost 150 travel PT job openings in California, versus some other states might have 6. So, if you want a best bet of finding almost any setting, California is probably where you would get licensed.
If this is the same Sarah I'm thinking of, Sarah, is it you that lives in Virginia or North Carolina that we had talked before? I think it is. So I don't know if you're looking to go all the way out west, but another good thing to know is just we can put you in touch with some recruiters that have a lot more of these answers, and they can pull historical data out of their database and say, look, in the past year, we've had this many pediatric jobs in the state of Virginia, this many pediatric jobs in the state of California, this many in the state of Texas, and they could tell you that information better than we could.
And schools as well. Schools might be an option for you.
Yes, there's a lot of school jobs right now. If anybody's looking for school jobs, right now is the time. Over the next couple months for next school year, there's a lot coming out, especially for speech therapists, but also PTs and OTs. No, we're not moving to Europe. We're just going there for 4 months.
We're just traveling.
We'll be back. Okay. You're in grad school in London? That's awesome. I didn't know that. Cool.
We were in London last year. We're not going there this year, but we're going to 15 countries in Europe, so we'll be traveling all around.
That's so awesome. We'll have to talk more after this. Okay, we got to answer our last couple questions because Jared wants to go watch Game of Thrones. Okay, Lauren wants to know, what's your recommendation for good productivity standards? So they don't usually, in outpatient, they don't usually give you a percentage the way they do in like SNF.
Yeah, it'd be patients per day.
Yeah, patients per day.
So I would say maximum that we want to have scheduled in a day is 14.
In an 8-hour day.
I have had more than that, but that is not something that I do often, or not something that I want to see like, you know, every day more than that. Like an occasional really busy day, okay. But yeah, 14 is the maximum. I would like it to be scheduled somewhere between like 12, or somewhere around 12, somewhere between 12 and 14. And then after cancellations, you might see somewhere between 10 and 12, which is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, so usually you just want to ask them what's an average number of patients per day that are scheduled, and what do you typically see? Like, do you have a high cancellation rate? Because right now our schedule is built out to allow for 14 patients if they don't do any double books.
Yep.
But when I interviewed, my manager let me know that on average they're realistically seeing more like 10 to 12, and that's been 100% true. Some days I've been double booked a couple of times, so I've been scheduled up to 15 to 16, but I would say across the board on average I've seen 10 to 12 a day, which is a really good number.
Yep.
So yeah, that's just what you're gonna ask.
As far as productivity for skilled nursing, I would say you probably want to take somewhere around, I wouldn't go higher than 85. That would be the highest that I would say would be, what do you think, 85? 90 would be really pushing it, but 85 would probably be the highest I would ever take a skilled nursing job as a therapist. Maybe as a coder or a PTA, you might be able to make it to 90, but 85 is like probably the limit. And I would really like somewhere around 80.
Okay. Lauren says, talking about pediatric jobs, a recruiter said LA, Illinois, North Carolina, Texas, and California. Yeah, we actually have another recruiter that says she has a lot of pediatrics in Texas. So Sarah, I can talk to you about that after this.
Ryan said, are there PTs for dogs? Yes, there are PTs for dogs, actually.
Yes, Ryan, there are, but we don't do that. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that we have. If you guys are watching now or watching on the replay, if you have any other questions, please feel free to comment on the video with any questions. Feel free to comment recruiter if you want recruiter information. Feel free to message us if you want to. We would really appreciate it if you would like this video, if you would like our travel therapy.
Tag a friend, like the video, please.
Tag a friend. I know there's so many new grads out there right now. They're like, should I take a travel job?
Yep.
And there's so many PTs out there that want to work outpatient. So if you have friends that want to do outpatient, please tag them in this video and they can listen to us.
This is our last week in Fredericksburg. I finished my job Thursday, Whitney finishes hers Friday, and we moved back to Roanoke on Friday. We have 1 week there, and then we're going to Europe. So next Sunday, we'll be out of this kitchen, and I don't know where we'll be filming this video, but it won't be in the kitchen anymore. So
probably mom or dad's house. Oh, also Sunday is Mother's Day, so we'll have to think about whether that's a good day or not. So we'll see, either Sunday or Monday. We'll let you know.
And if you guys have any recommendations for stuff we can talk about, feel free to send us a message or leave a comment here, and we'll come up with something good to talk about.
Yep, you can reach us on our Travel Therapy Mentor page. If you want to send us a message, you can send us an email through our website, traveltherapymentor.com. If you want to email back and forth, just let us know. We're here.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great night.
See you next week.